This is a TalkStation original podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Paper Boys podcast. I'm JJ Smith.
And I'm Zach Nally.
We're sports reporters with the Carteret County News-Times. We are joined by a telephone today by former Beaufort Seadogs star and All-ACC guard for Wake Forest, Butch Hassell. Thanks for being with us.
I'm excited to be here, guys.
Butch, you were with us at an appropriate time. Zach, tell us what happened a couple weeks ago, because you wrote a column about it. Paul McNeil.
Yeah, that's right. Broke the scoring record.
Right. It was 74 points.
That's right.
Oh, my goodness. That's great.
It's quite a bit.
And the record was what, 70 years old or something?
It was a long time.
Yeah.
But the score of the game was like, 103 to 40. It was pretty tough. And the argument we made was, that coaches nowadays usually don't let you go and score that many points unless the game is really close and you're still trying to win.
Right. So Butch didn't put 70 on the board, but Butch did put 50 back on the board back in the day. According to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, you were one of only 77 players in state history to score 50 points in a game.
I didn't realize it was that number, but I did know that the 50 was a milestone, obviously for me, but also for the team. And I will mention the score was one-sided. I don't remember why I was still in the game, but I do remember being in the game and we had 99 points on the board, and I got fouled, and I missed both free throws.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The crowd was, pleading for 100 points. I missed both. So the 50 was wonderful to get, but it was a little bit tarnished there at the end.
Put a sour note on your 50 night.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what's it like scoring 50 points in a high school basketball game?
It's one of those things that you just took it in stride. I had great teammates, and part of my job, particularly my senior year, and even before then, was scoring the ball. And we had guys, that played great defense, ran the offense well. And one of my jobs was just to, score the ball most of the time. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And that game, it just flowed. And I didn't play much of the third quarter. And I don't really remember the exact times I played, but one of my good teammates and buddies in the past has told that story that he didn't even play in the third quarter, and yet he still got 50. I don't really remember how it all happened, and didn't know that I had 50 until at the end of the game. We had a huge fan, Ruffy.
Oh, yeah.
His name, and I can't bring up his full name.
Ruffy Daniels.
If anybody's listening in Carteret County, it's still around. It was around in those days. We know who I'm talking about. He could not speak. He could, but he was a huge fan of the team. And after every game, he would communicate to me with his hands how many points I had scored or how many assists I had. He knew all of those stats in his head. And he was the first one in the locker room telling me I had scored 50 points. And that was the highlight. It obviously had thrilled him as much as it did me.
Oh, Ruffy Daniels.
Ruffy Daniels, thank you. That's exactly who it was.
Yeah. So
such a big guy, a good guy, a big fan.
Oh, yeah.
He worked with my dad often Dad was a civil engineer, and Ruffy worked some projects with him a lot. And
so you had no clue that you scored that many points?
I really didn't, and that wasn't too unusual. Our coach, Coach McQuaid, who was a legend in his own right there at Beaufort, of course, in Carteret County, he wouldn't put up much with us keeping our own scores or touting our own exploits, so to speak. If you were showing a lot of too much pride, I'll call it, and he read it that way, you were dismissed from the gym. You didn't practice that day, or he made sure that he kept all of us in line, so to speak, as a team, and that we would win and lose as a team, only in that method.
There's a number of things remarkable about that 50-point night. According to the Carteret County News-Times, an establishment we know well, you only played 2 quarters that night.
There you go. I couldn't really remember, but it was Well, I will beg forgiveness because it's been too long.
But see, that's what I mean.
But I'm happy to be here to be able to talk about it.
When you have those kind of scoring nights, it seems like the only way to do it is to is to get it done quickly, because once the score gets out of hand, you're not going to have a chance to see the floor.
Coach is going to pull you.
Yeah.
You're right, Zach. Yeah. And Coach McQuaid was, he'd run us in and out, so to speak. He liked to play a lot of players, particularly in a game when we were pretty much in control of it. And my last year, we just about, we had a great season where we won most of our games in double figures, that type of thing. So a lot of our guys got to play a lot of minutes. And Coach made sure that, and it worked very well, because when we got to playoff time and into state championship runs, we had a lot of guys that could come off the bench, so to speak, and do a good job for us.
And the other thing that's remarkable about that is, of course, obviously no three-point line back then.
You're right. I often think about that, not so much in high school, but when I got to Wake Forest, of course, we didn't have the three-point rule then, and that's where I was able to score the ball. Obviously, because of my size, I had to shoot mainly from the outside, and a lot of us that didn't play in that three-point era would love to have had that chance to do it, because it influences, particularly now in today's ball game. It's unbelievable how much it influences the score.
Yeah, I was looking at the record book to look up your stuff, Butch, and I was looking up three-pointers and, the advent of that and how popular those are now. And I think of the top 5 in the state team-wise that had made the most in a season, and the East Carteret team that finished as the state runner-up the next year. They won the state title, but let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're 7th all-time in state history. They made 283 that season.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you talk about the advent of the three-point line making a difference now. That's a lot of three-pointers.
That's a lot of three-pointers, and it is just, I think, it's influenced the game to the better, particularly, I'll say, even in high school too. But I don't know. It reaches a point, though. I thought I watched a little bit of the NBA All-Star game this past weekend, and I turned it off eventually because they scored over almost 400 points.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of threes, and those guys can just, it's like shooting layups when we were playing. They just excel at shooting that ball now, and I really like that.
Well, I'm curious, as somebody who didn't get a chance to watch a lot of basketball back then, were guys you played with capable of shooting threes if they had suddenly magically popped a three-point line down in the middle of a season? I mean, were guys taking deep shots ever? Or I'm just so curious about how it would have looked those first few years the three-point line came around, and how obviously much better they are at it now, but were there people taking deep shots back then? That's
a great question. Yes. The long and short of it is we had drills in high school that Coach McQuaid we played around the world, and what we call around the world is actually around the court, shooting deep shots, and you'd follow it and take a shorter shot and then follow it with a layup. A great many of our guys could shoot from out, and myself in particular, I had a good jump shot, I'll call it, and I could hit from just about, particularly now, guys, in that Beaufort gym. You got to realize I grew up in that gym, and from a little guy to right on to the high school, and I could pretty much, I had a lot of confidence when I was shooting in that gym particularly, and I could hit the ball, hit the shot from just about anywhere on that court. And we didn't even think about a three-point conversion because it wasn't even talked about at that time. When I got into college and played with some very good talent. Lenny Chappell was our big man, and he was a guy about 6'8", weighed 240, and he was one of the first big men that in the ACC that could shoot from outside as well as inside. He was really strong inside, but we didn't have the three-point then. And had we had the three-point, Lenny would have set a lot more records than he did. And I'll tell you, he averaged 32 points a game and 18 rebounds a game for those are give or take close numbers for the 2 years running, and he was MVP in the ACC for two straight years. So, but the three-point shot was something I look back on and I would love to have the opportunity to play in that era. And it is the kind of shot that all of our guys, all of the players would have adjusted to and moved back. We still shot jump shots outside, not all of them were in the 3-point range, but they were close, and we, of course, could have adjusted to that, I'm sure.
At the time, that was the 9th best scoring mark in the state, Butch. Now you are 65th.
Woo!
Whoa. You mean the team record?
No, the 50 points.
Oh, the 50.
Yeah.
Wow. Not too long ago when somebody sent me a copy of it, I was much lower than that.
You went from 9 to 65.
That's one thing that happens. The longer you live, and things keep coming around, people start losing or getting the distance in there that they have against you.
You start getting pushed down the list, right?
Now, is that best in the county?
State.
No, I mean like in terms of.
Oh yeah, but yeah, now Butch still holds.
Is Butch still the
he's
county?
He's still number one in the county. This is what 64 years later. Nobody's topped you.
Well, the reason I asked is
realize that
when we did go ahead, Butch.
Several years ago, and not that many. I'm gonna say maybe we had an undefeated team right there at East Carteret, and they went to the state championship, and I think they were undefeated. Is that correct?
That's right. You're right.
Yeah. My cousin Pud, Charles Hassell, he sent me several emails, texts, and kept me posted on that season. And he enjoyed. I think he went to the final championship game and was just blown away with the talent we had on that team.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of guys have come close. We had a kid at Croatan, Jacques Chambers. I think he's got 47. Is that right, Zach?
Yeah.
And Sam Johnson at East Carteret, I think he was 44, 42, something like that. We've had a couple kids in the 40s, but nobody's hit the big 5-0 like Butch Hassell back in 1960. And I don't want to make the crowd to Newport feel bad, but it was against Newport that night. So.
Yeah, it was against Newport. I remember that. And I'll tell you a quick story. They had early in, I'm going to say 1952 or 3, something like that. You had to check it out. They won the state championship.
That's right.
And they had a white-haired fella. I can't remember his name.
Was it Mr.
Say it, I know it.
Was it Mr. Billy Widgeon?
What was it? Billy Widgeon. There you go. Thank you. I think he got. If he didn't get 50, he got close to it one night.
Okay.
I think he had. He was just. I remember him as if I was probably at that time, I don't know, 12, 14, something like that. So
Yeah.
I was into everything about ball, and particularly the Newport team was so good.
Yeah.
And I remember Billy Widgeon just being an outstanding basketball player.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we talked about the gentleman at Richmond that broke the record. That was Paul McNeil. It was 71 points.
71.
It was a 74-year-old record.
74 years old.
And a 118-52 win over Lee County.
Woo!
118. Wow.
Yeah, so definitely some more points being scored these days. No, here's what's funny. So you guys are talking about this game between Newport and Beaufort, and you're talking about the win streak that I'm assuming, Butch, you were part of the beginning of this long win streak with the Seadogs, right?
I was, yeah.
So and don't hold this against me now, Butch. I'm a Newport guy, and I went to West Carteret. My apologies.
Zach is born and raised in Newport.
I cannot help it. So one of my jobs is to go through and find old articles to post with our newsletters that we do twice a week. And this week, for Tuesday's newsletter, the article I settled on was the front page of the February 20th, 1962 issue, which is the morning after the Morehead City Eagles. Is that right?
Yeah.
The Morehead City Eagles toppled the Beaufort Seadogs 61-60, triple overtime to end the 91-game win streak. And there's a gentleman in Beaufort, I'm assuming this is a relative, Ray Hassell. This is all, so it's all coming together here.
Just randomly, that's the issue you picked.
As I sat down and I'm looking at these notes here for today, and I realized the connection. I said, I can't wait to bring this out. But it was a big deal. It was front. I mean, we don't rarely get sports on the front page.
Sports wouldn't run on the front page usually. Oh my gosh, look at that headline. It's gigantic.
All it took was 1 point, 61-60.
All it took was 1 point.
That was huge news.
Yeah.
That was, I was there we won 51. And then had won 2 state championships, and then I graduated, went on to Wake Forest, and the guys kept winning, obviously till 91, to that game you mentioned, and it's Ray, my cousin, Hood, my cousin, and John, my brother. We all started at one time when I was a senior, and John was a freshman at that time. He started a few games, but he played quite a bit afterward. But Ray, I tell a story. We won 91 straight games, and I wasn't there, but I heard it later. They were in the locker room. They had lost that game after 91 straight, 3 overtimes. One of our guys missed 2 free throws that would have tied it and would have won it. And Ray supposedly stood up and said, well, you win some, you lose some. Just go on to the next one.
after 91.
Coach McQuaid said, well said, Ray. Then we went on. They started on to the next street. I think the next year or two they went to the final. I'll call it the Final Four, right to the state finals.
Uh-huh.
Although they didn't win, they still had great records and still had good players still at that time.
And boy, Butch, of all the teams to have the streak into, Moorhead, right?
All the teams that the biggest rival by far was Moorhead, and we had some really battles with them. That if we had back in the day, they had in football when we would play them, they had what they call the mullet bucket. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh yeah, we're still doing the mullet bucket all these years later.
Okay, good. And that was a major trophy. And in football, they had won it for 8-9 years straight. Coach Norman Clark was the Bear Bryant of the East Coast. I mean, just a tremendous football coach and a great man. I got to know Coach Clark after graduation, and as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, we were pen pals. We wrote back and forth until his passing. But he had always had great teams, and they drubbed us almost every year in football. And our senior year, my senior year, we beat them in football and reclaimed the mullet bucket, and then went on to win the state championship in football. And many of the same guys that, of course, on the basketball team played on the football team, which was not unusual in that day. We went from one season to the other, transitioned right into playing the football, the baseball, the basketball, or whatever. But we did win that championship in football, got the mullet bucket. They had to come over and present it to us in the auditorium.
Right.
It was a huge deal, and it was one that we relished because, unfortunately, Moorhead owned it for many years.
I remember doing some research on those era back then, and how amazing that was that a couple of the boys from the other team would have to come to the other school, and it was like during the daytime, right? You'd have the whole school would come in there. It was a whole thing where they would hand you the trophy back, right?
It was a huge deal, and I remember going to Moorhead with my tail between my legs a couple of times, acknowledging that they keeping it, because even though we didn't have it to go present, we had to go over there and take a drubbing, so to speak, from the crowd.
That's interesting.
So it was
like
always and you know what? It's something I mentioned. There used to be a drive-in hamburger place called Dom's. Dom L's. They had it on the beach, but Dom's is off of Arundel Street, Moorhead City, where most of the kids would gather, as they used to do in the old days, and we'd all go over and in our cars and be razzing each other, that type of thing, and never have any dangerous fights or anything like that I can remember anyway. But every year, Dom Femia, I'm pretty sure is his last name, was just a terrific fan and/or sponsor for Moorhead and/or in the Carteret County area. And he'd fill the mullet bucket up with hamburgers, and for the winning team. And so it was a rite of passage, so to speak, to be able to not only win the mullet bucket, but go to Dom's, and he'd fill up that bucket, and everybody would be, enjoying the evening, cheering, that type of thing. And the losing team, some of them would be there. Most of the time we didn't go because we lost most of the time. But when we did win, we were able to have an enjoyable evening, to say the least.
Well, we've been talking about it some, and Butch might not have the state record for scoring points in a game, but he is part of a state record that still stands to this day. The Beaufort Seadogs won 91 games in a row from 1960 to 1962. One of the stories I wrote, actually they've got that in the NCHSA. It says 1960 to 62, but actually it was longer than that. Some research I did, one of the stories, I've written probably half a dozen stories on those Seadogs, and I wrote that on December 4th, 1958, the Beaufort Seadogs won its opening game of the season. It was 67-40 over Pamlico in front of an enthusiastic home crowd, and the next loss didn't happen until February 16th, 1962.
Gosh.
So from December of 58 to February of 62, no losses for the Seadogs. That's still number one in the state.
Whoever was freshman that year, they didn't learn a whole lot of lessons in terms of how to lose, did they?
They didn't learn how to face adversity or how to overcome failure, did they, Butch?
That's right. I mean, it was just sort of, we just kept winning. It's kind of started, guys, early on when we were in grade school. Our parents, particularly my dad and my Uncle Ray and Uncle Charles, they were very sports-minded and very much involved. Uncle Charles started the first Little League coach that Beaufort had. Uncle Ray, he coached what we call the midget team. We all came through his coaching and as young guys, young people, and it was a midget team call, and we learned all the fundamentals there. When we got to high school, not to college, but when we got to high school, we had all that training fundamentals behind us, and we were ready to play very competitive basketball in this case. And unfortunately, most of the other teams that we were playing at that time didn't have that luxury, if you will, to come up that way. And not really realizing it at the time, but looking back on it, I realized that we really had an advantage because we had all those years played basketball and learned how to dribble, how to look for the open man, how to an assist is just as good as a basket, that type of thing. It was drilled in our heads. And when we got ready to play competitive high school basketball, we were pretty much a step ahead of most of our competition.
Number 2 on that list is Stanley, which is a high school I don't think exists anymore. That was 1938 to 1942. They have 88 in a row, so Beaufort got them by 3. And then Durham High School is 73. Yep. They're pretty far down the list. That was 37 to 40. So all 3 of those are back in the day. Now, nationwide, Beaufort is 10th. So that's still pretty good. At the time, they were 2nd.
Yeah.
The only team that was ahead of them back then was Passaic, I always imagine is how you pronounce it, Passaic in New Jersey. They won 159 games in a row.
Oh, my goodness. Can you imagine?
From 1919 to 1925. And now, Butch, you all have been pushed down to number 10. Since then, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's some from the 80s. Actually, there's one in the 2000s here. There's one most of these are from the 80s. So
I was going to say, like, it seems like the end of the 60s, early 90s is where a lot of this takes place.
So still, hey, number 10 in the country. That's still pretty good.
That's still pretty good. Obviously, we're proud of that, and I'm sure Beaufort's proud of it, and the county's proud of it.
For sure.
Yeah, I will say, Beaufort got a lot of credit for all the championships, et cetera. But when the season, the local season, the county tournament season ended, the whole counties came together and attended a lot of our games that we went on to play in the district championships and then the state championships. It was not unusual at all to have people in the stands from Moorhead and Newport and Atlantic or Smyrna, whatever. And when we came back after we won, they'd have a parade that started in West Moorhead, almost in Newport, and we'd be on the top of convertibles, driving through the main towns, and people just acknowledging our wins. And obviously the players were put on pedestals, but we realized then too, but mostly afterwards, that it wasn't just the players, it was a community effort. I mean, the county came behind us, and particularly the Beaufort people. When we had a away game, the whole town shut down, and there was a caravan to the game, that kind of thing. And
I've seen pictures of that in old issues of the paper where, I mean, the crowd is hundreds of people gathered around those old school buses, and
Zach, you're right. It looks
incredible.
It was
for a first round playoff game.
It can happen now. I don't know that, but I do know that back in the day, that was a wonderful thing for the community, and everybody participated. It seemed like.
Butch, you were talking about the town support and just the way everybody would rally around those Beaufort Seadogs teams. Tell us about Bobby Martin and the barbershop and how he kind of ended up sticking, not being able to come through on a promise that he made.
Well, I'm not sure about the promise that you're referring to, but I will tell you, Bobby Martin was one of our number one fans. He was the local barber, and all the teammates went. I think haircuts at the time were about 25 cents a piece, and Bobby would forego any kind of payment because he was such a fan. And just as an aside story, he took my cousin Pud and myself and a couple other fellows to New York City. We drove all night to see the New York Yankees play the Chicago White Sox in a weekend series. Stayed 2 nights and drove all the way back. And Bobby, we still laugh about what were our parents thinking, let us drive and go all that way with Bobby. That's how much confidence they had in him, though. And he was just such a big fan.
I think it was Pud, and one of the stories I wrote talked about how he said that, as long as y'all kept winning, he'd give you free haircuts. And I think Pud said about 3.5 years later, he about went bankrupt.
He was about out of money. He was. He was such a good guy. And, there was so many people like that. Reflecting back on it, I was thinking, the World War II ended in 45 or whatever, and everybody was still, we're talking in the early 50s when all this was formulating. We were growing up there in Beaufort, and everybody was a hardworking group, and the entertainment a lot of the entertainment would come from the high school sports. And it took the whole county, all the people, but loved to participate in it. We had a group in Beaufort that was called the Vigilantes. And I forget how many, I don't know how many people were in that, but they would put on oyster roast, they put on any kind of a parade or what have you for benefit, and try to gain money for the, for the athletic programs and that type of thing. But it seemed like everybody was involved in, like I mentioned earlier, when we had an away game, there was a caravan, and nobody was left in Beaufort. They were all at the game. That's just the way it was.
Yeah, I think you all said that the businesses would put signs on their door that said, going to the state championship.
Yeah, they would. And those that couldn't come, especially to the state championship, that would be a long trip, say, for instance, from Beaufort to High Point, North Carolina, or Winston-Salem, which we did a couple of times. And so they couldn't afford to go, or it's just a long trip.
Yeah.
But we'd get a telegram rolled up, and it unrolled. It would be about 30 or 40, 50 feet long. Everybody just signed it and made comments and wished us good luck and that type of thing. So it was a community effort, and I think I failed to mention that in '55 we had the first undefeated state championship Seadog team. And those guys were my idol, and most of the players that I played with later, we idolized those guys, and that was a team that went undefeated and won the state championship on the last second shot. And a couple of the guys on that team that we beat ended up going to Wake Forest, and I ended up razzing them quite a bit over their loss to us.
You bring up that thing that everybody signed, and I thought to myself, man, they don't really do stuff like that anymore. Obviously, it's a little different. But I guess if you took every Facebook like, every comment,
social media,
everything on social media, and put it on a banner, it would look the same. It just doesn't feel quite. I mean, I guess generational, but I like the idea of the big signed banner to let people know that you're supported and they're thinking about you while you're going up there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Zach. I made the comment. It doesn't seem like it's that way today, but with social media way it is, my goodness, it's instantaneous. We'd probably been the teams that are winning now. They probably get it indulged totally, smothered over with comments on their smartphones, right?
That's right. And Bobby Martin, let's see, he had the barbershop, it says, on the corner of Ann Street and Live Oak, and then and then you had Mrs. Lilly on the corner of 101 and West Beaufort, who said she'd give you all some free cheeseburgers if you kept winning. Oh,
yes, she did. It was excellent the way they supported us, and it also you had to be careful. You couldn't do much wrong. You wouldn't want to be off get off the grid, so to speak, and get caught doing something, because it would be reported back to Coach McQuaid first, which is trouble, and your parents, that kind of thing. It was just a situation where if you were not walking a straight line, it would be reported back to those that you didn't want to know about. And so it sort of kept us all in line.
All eyes.
Quick story, if you will. We came back from celebrating a win over Moorhead one night in my car, and we flew across the old Beaufort Bridge, I'll call it, just probably, I don't know how fast we were going, but too fast. And the one and only policeman stopped us. Mac Wade was his name. I think we woke him up when we drove by so fast. And he came by, he pulled us over, and he looked in with his flashlight, and he said, "Butch, is that you?" I said, "Yes, Mr. Wade." He said, "You go straight home. I'm calling your dad." I had to go home, and before I got home, Dad was on the front porch, and I was grounded for I don't know how long. But instead of going to being fingerprinting, going to jail or what have you, in those days, the whole community was looking out for you.
All eyes were on the Seadogs, huh?
All eyes were on the Seadogs, I must admit, yeah. And I got to tell you, they're a great team. Newport had good teams. And Smyrna particularly had a good team my last year. And they took us down to, I think we beat them by 2 or something like that in our place. And it was full to the rafters, people hollering. I remember that game just like it was yesterday. So they had some good ball players.
I know you mentioned that youth team that you guys were on. I know you all have always pointed to that, how that set such a great foundation of knowing the game. And then you've also, as you previously mentioned, that 55 state champion team was such an inspiration to you guys. And that was Gurman Holland and Monk Pittman. Gurman Holland went on to play at Carolina, Pittman for Wake Forest. And I know some of y'all have mentioned that seeing them do it made y'all realize that you could do it.
Exactly. That's well put, JJ. We idolized them, and we went to the gym and tried to play behind them or with them, that type of thing. I remember Gurman went to Carolina. He was on the 57 undefeated team that beat Wilt Chamberlain in Kansas. And anybody and everybody in North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, whatever, became a Tar Heel fan that year. They were so great. Gurman would come home, and any kind of equipment like long socks, old sweatshirt, something like that, he would give it to one of us guys, and it was like the biggest trophy you can imagine. I wore a pair of long socks he gave me for about 4 or 5 straight years, practicing and playing in the games with him. Murray, or Monk Pittman, he played at Wake Forest for a couple of years. Unfortunately, he was married and started having a family, so that took him out of the picture.
Okay.
I think, I know Gurman's gone. Monk's gone. Herbert Mason, he's gone. Jimmy Davis was the other forward, he's gone. Henry Seyfert was a forward on that team, and he went on, he's a doctor in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
He also bicycled from San Francisco to Charleston, South Carolina about, I'm going to say 10, 12 years ago.
Oh, wow. Well,
he wrote a book. It's an interesting book. He's a great guy, good guy.
This is the Henry Seyfert you're talking about?
Henry Seyfert.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys were what, about like middle school then? So you thought those guys hung the moon, huh?
Yep, exactly. They were our idols. There's no question about it. And they were good guys, and they set the standard. They really did.
You've mentioned his name a number of times on the podcast, on this episode, Butch, and I think he probably deserves an entire segment here. Tom McQuaid, during a 20-year stretch from 1945 to 1965, he led the Seadogs to 4 state championships, all of those undefeated, which is just unbelievable. The 91-game winning streak is unbelievable. He went 368-75 in those 20 years. Tell us about what it was like playing for Tom McQuaid.
Well, Coach McQuaid was an icon. As mentioned earlier, my growing up and being idolizing the players that went on that 55 team and getting exposed to Coach McQuaid. In the 8th grade, he allowed me to be the ball boy for the varsity team, and I got to know Coach McQuaid from then on. And Coach he was eons ahead of his time for high school coaching. He went on the summer. In the summers, he would go up into the Catskill Mountains. He had an association with a fellow by the name of Buck Freeman, who was a legend at University of North Carolina when Frank McGuire was there. And he was had a basketball mind, was ahead of his time. And Coach McQuaid spent a lot of time with him. He came back with a lot of innovative drills and skills teaching that only he, I think, knew at the time. For instance, he had us wear ankle bracelets, weighted ankle bracelets, and arm weights during most of our practices. So we were strengthening our legs, strengthening our arms and hands. He was also one of the first ones to put a smaller cylinder over the basketball goal, so the ball wouldn't go through; it would bounce off or rebound. And we had rebounding drills with that type of apparatus up there that wouldn't let the ball go through. So it's just that type of thing that he was always looking ahead and bringing back and applying to our team. And I guess that he came from in the Ohio area and learned a lot about basketball there and sports, but he was quite an athlete himself in his day. I will quickly tell you that he was a disciplinarian above all else. You did it Coach McQuaid's way, or you didn't do it. And we had several young players come through that were potentially going to be great athletes, but they would not did not show the discipline that Coach McQuaid insisted on, and they chose not to play, or he would not allow them to play. And so it turns out, obviously, his record speaks for itself. It was following him and his leadership led to a lot of victories, to say the least.
It was Tom McQuaid's way or the highway, huh?
Pretty much. That's a good way to put it. I had a lot of respect for him and his wife, and I had the good fortune. Coach passed away, I'm not sure when now, but several years later he was inducted into the North Carolina Hall of Fame. And his wife, Pearl McQuaid, asked me to come and escort her as a representing Coach McQuaid, who was posthumously got into the Hall of Fame there in North Carolina. That was quite an honor.
Oh, wow.
For me. And of course, it was a great honor for him and his wife and family.
Tell us about Take It In.
I'm sorry?
Tell us about Take It In. Back in the day, he would tell you to take it in.
Oh, my gosh. Well, at one time I had, toward the end of our regular season, the accolades, so to speak, came out, who made All-County and that type of thing. And I had made All-County, had been in the paper, the News-Times. Which, by the way, the News-Times is the gold standard in those days. And when it came out, everybody couldn't wait. In fact, I think people went to the News-Times and got the paper before you delivered it, if they could, to read the sports pages and all about how the Seadogs or how the Eagles or how the Newport team is doing, et cetera. It was really great, and the coverage was over above the top. Well, those are the kind of things that it inspired us, to keep going, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I forgot where I was going before I got there.
The take it in.
What was the question?
The coach telling y'all to take it in.
Oh, that's right. I had just announced All-County, so I was in the gym. We were shooting around. Coach hadn't come in yet. He came in. The girls had been practicing. They left. And I was working on an injury of some kind, maybe a slight groin injury or something, so I wasn't out doing the regular drills. I was over there just bouncing the ball. And the ball went astray a little bit, and I bounced it too hard. He turned around and said, "Get out." I said, "What? Get out now." And really, he said, you got to set up, basically was saying, if you're not going to pay attention to what we're doing out here with these drills, I want you out of here. And so, it was, looking back, it was his way of not letting me get too conceited or too on a high horse that, I may have just made All-County, but I was not going to not participate.
And I understand, Butch, that he was quite the superstitious type.
He was indeed. I think he wore the same pair of socks for 91 straight games. And the same gray suit. I can see him right now.
Uh-huh.
And we had to be careful what the lines we stepped on the side, warming up and that type of thing. He was got us all kind of superstitious in that way. we didn't want to change anything, of course, when we were on that winning streak.
Right. And somebody says whatever, what was it, that if somebody drove them to the first game of the year, that was it? They had to drive them to all the games the rest of the season?
That's right. Yeah. And no matter where you sat in the car, you know, you had to sit in the same place. And the same driver had to drive and that type of thing. And it was kind of fun looking back on it, but nobody was going to take a chance, you know, and, especially one of the players. If they sat in the wrong place or something like that and he found out about it, he would be on your case in a heartbeat.
Right. Oh, boy, I bet those socks were in good shape by the end of that run.
Yeah, they were funny. We had everybody had a turn to bring oranges to the game at the halftime.
That's what I was going to ask about next. Who's got the oranges?
Okay, that's right. And one time, one of our great fellows that didn't play a whole lot, but he was just a terrific teammate. Doug Swain was his name. He forgot to bring the oranges. He realized it about 2 minutes before the half, and we were all in there, and Coach McQuaid said, "Where are the oranges?" Everybody looked at everybody. Doug was over there. He wished he could be about 6 foot under, I'm sure. I don't really actually remember what Coach did, but I'm sure he punished him in some way that he would not ever forget that again, the oranges.
And y'all said he wasn't much for halftime adjustments, so there wasn't a lot of talk in the locker room at halftime.
Oh, no, not much. You know, everybody think if we were in a close game, especially at the half, you know, we'd go in there and everybody outside, we'd hear later that they said, "Don't worry, Coach McQuaid's going to talk it up. He's going to get them straight. He'll come out and they'll have a whole new plan and they'll blow them out." Well, we'd come out, or actually, at the halftime, he'd say, "Everybody have an orange," you know. And if he had maybe one or two obvious statements to make that somebody had been, you know, not playing good defense or the team hadn't been doing something right, he'd make a comment on it. And next thing you know, we'd be out and we'd just take off from there, and invariably we'd win going away. And everybody just say, "Well, wow, Coach must have really talked him up." You know, he didn't have to say much. We knew with his body language, what we had to do.
And you were mentioning about the clinics he would go to. I know that people said he went to college coach clinics with Claire B. and Hank Iba, and I know Pood said that when he went to Carolina, there wasn't nothing he couldn't teach him that he didn't already know from Tom McQuaid.
Pretty much true. He was a student of the game for sure. And I remember even in high school at study break or study hall period, he would it was a North Carolina black and white TV channel, North Carolina University channel, that it was innovative in first bringing, and of course it was UNC games on black and white TV, and he would show us, somehow he got tapes of it, and we would watch those during study hall. And a lot of times he'd point out, you know, it was like having a training film or what have you. He'd point out the good things that teams were doing and or the bad. But he was always looking for something like that to enhance the program there and the athletes as well.
Well, you know, the thing about high school coaches, too, is no matter if you're really good or just okay, you all get paid the same, and it's not very much. And, you know, even now today, coaches just don't get paid nearly what they deserve for the time they put in. But Tom McQuaid had reached a point in 1959 where the News Times reported that he was done. He was coaching math. He was distributing textbooks. He was carrying mail. He was doing everything he could to pay the bills. And one of the things that you know, the coaching stipend back then wasn't a lot, and he said I guess he had to stop doing that in order to pursue other ways of making money. And I guess the town or the booster club came together and was presented with a new Ford car from the grateful followers of Seadog basketball, and he said, "You know what? I think I'll stay for a little bit and see what happens." And this is kind of...
I'm not sure, Zach. That was a totally accurate story. I definitely remember the town and community coming together and presenting him I guess it was a 59 or a 60 Ford from a new Ford, and everybody was thrilled as he was to receive it. I don't know if anything else was ever presented to him, and I don't think it was like money or anything like that.
No,
but,
and obviously, it's nice to show your appreciation to the people that are putting in countless hours to not only coach these young men to victories, but to coach them up in life and stuff. And we were talking about it earlier. I think it's fascinating because at that point when he was ready to leave, the winning streak that we all talk about, 91 games, started in 58, as you pointed out earlier, JJ, and he, 59, he was ready to go. And so the winning streak that maybe never would have been.
Never know.
But we get him to stay, and here comes the win streak. So it was a good investment in people by the town of Beaufort and the folks that love the Seadogs. So,
well, that's just another example of the community, recognizing what we had going there, and they were a big part of it by them taking that initiative and making sure Coach McQuaid stayed with us. The results speak for itself. That was just all part of our space at that time, our living area. It was great.
Butch, you guys have always talked about so many things that built into that 3-year run of 3 state championships, undefeated, 91 game winning streak. The youth team, the midget team you were on, that 55 team that inspired you. Obviously, Tom McQuaid is the general that led you all into all those victories. But probably one of the more unsung members of that tradition that you all developed there in Beaufort was Jimmy Fodry, the assistant coach. You all said that he deserves a ton of credit.
Yes, Jimmy, particularly speaking personally now, and stepping away from the team for a moment. Jimmy Fodry was only like 10 years older than I was. So I'm 18, whatever, in high school. He's 28. And for years before, when I was growing up in the recreational league there in Beaufort, when 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, Jimmy, in the summers, was most of those summers running the recreation program for Beaufort. And he took a lot of us guys under his wing, and particularly me. And we played baseball, basketball, swam, all kinds of things. We had an old bus that we took to Camp Moorhead and played guys over there. Our basketball team or our baseball team would go over there and play then. We played one night in that little small gym they had, believe it or not, smaller than the Beaufort and/or Moorhead gym, much smaller. And we go in there and played, and we were playing the counselors. These are kids from around the state that were coming down and be a counselor for the young kids, and a lot of good athletes. Well, we were playing them and punishing them, really punishing them, beating them bad, and all of a sudden one of them hit me back in the head, and Jimmy Fodry, who was playing with us, and by the way, he's one of the best ball players I'd ever played with or against, including college. He cold-cocked the guy that hit me, and we had to fight our way out of that little gym, get on the bus, which wouldn't start. We had to park it on the hill, and their guys had to push the bus to get us out of there and make it out of there alive, so to speak, that night. I went on, and Jimmy would come back from he went to college at Barton College in Wilson, North Carolina, which at one time was named, I forget now what it's named. But
Atlantic Christian.
Atlantic Christian, thank you, yeah. And he played there and set all kinds of records. Oh, he played also on the City League team, Fry Roofing, and he averaged like 40 points a game.
Oh, wow.
But when he would come back and on the weekends, we'd play pickup ball in the Beaufort gym. And he and I would go at it one-on-one, and he would not give me any slack. I give Jimmy a lot of credit for making me a better ball player, basketball player, particularly when I was going through my high school years into college. Playing him was like playing somebody at Wake Forest that was coming in there with me or any of the ACC schools.
Wow. And
he spent a lot of time with me. He spent a lot of time with just about all of our young people, and never got paid anything. He never asked for anything. He coached the girls' team at Beaufort ladies' team, and we had some great girls' basketball teams at that time. And some of the big scorers, like Pat Lupton, I remember was in my class. He must have averaged 30 points a game. And Jimmy was responsible for putting those girls' teams together, and he did a great job. He was also the assistant football coach when we won the state championship. And so he was just very much involved in us, and quite a legacy he left there in the Beaufort area.
You all said he was strong as a bull.
Strong as a bull. He was generally, I guess, Jimmy, probably 5'10" at best. He'd love to play in the middle in our pickup games. He would go in there and battle us, and in pickup games, you don't have a referee. So, you take your shots, and unless it really affected the attempt to make the basket, a lot of fouls were let go. Well, he was murder under there. And he made us a lot tougher because of the way he played, made us play.
Mr. Fodry taught me in the 8th grade at Atlantic Elementary School, and
is that right?
Yeah. During recess, he would come play basketball with us in the gym, and I don't know. He's probably in his 50s or 60s by then, and so he wasn't moving. He wasn't moving too well. But I'll tell you what, he was crafty. He'd do that move where he'd put the ball between his legs and act like he was doing a hook shot, and everybody would look up for the ball when it was stuck between his legs, and then he'd go grab it again, and then shoot it. Stuff like he would step on your feet when you were trying to go up for a shot. I mean, he was very crafty. That
was Fodry. He could shoot the ball. We used to have some great horse games in the gym where you shoot from the balcony, or he'd shoot from the other end of the court through the rafters, and it wasn't unusual at all for him to make those shots. He was just incredible shot maker, fun guy to be around. One maybe last story on Jimmy. When I had graduated in the summer before I was to go off to Wake Forest, he spent, for some reason, he was home for that summer, and we spent hours after hours, he and I, in the Beaufort gym in the summer now, and the Beaufort gym must have been 130 degrees if it was anything. It's so hot in there, playing one-on-one basketball and doing drills and pushing me to the limit. And it was, I look back on that, I loved doing it. He was a great guy, but what it did for me and enabled me to go on to the next level, I give him most of the credit for making me a better ball player for sure.
And, the News Times had a story about how Curtis Lancaster didn't want to be dunked in the shower after y'all won that football game, so you dunked Tom Hewitt and Jimmy Fodry and Lancaster too, huh?
Yeah, we did. That was a great coaching staff you mentioned there. Coach Lancaster, he came in my senior year, and he was at East Carolina University finishing up his degree, and could not be there for the first week or so, 10 days of August practice, when you usually had 2 a days because you're getting ready for the season. And so Coach Hewitt and Fodry gathered us waiting on Coach to get out of school. And we got started out where 18 players that showed up, and we were in shorts, of course, for the first couple of days. And nobody looked like they were a football player. I mean, we were all skinny little fellows. And Coach McQuaid took me to the side and suggested, he said, you might want to think twice about playing football. You've got an opportunity maybe to play somewhere in basketball when you go off to school. You could get hurt playing football this year. And I considered it, but when Coach Lancaster came, he was a direct opposite type motivator than Coach McQuaid. He was young. He was like maybe 6 or 7 years older than we were. He actually scrimmaged with us, as both of the coaches did, Fodry and Coach Hewitt, and created a camaraderie there with our players that it developed into a winning season. We lost only one game and went on to won the state championship. And I give almost a whole huge amount of credit to Coach Lancaster, how he motivated us and how he treated us. And we had fun celebrating the mullet bucket win that year. We had more fun celebrating the state championship that year. And yes, we did put them in the shower.
Sadly, Butch, over the past 6 months, you've lost a couple of key members of those famous Beaufort Seadog teams, Alton Hill and Ray Hassell, a cousin of yours. Tell us about what those guys were like as teammates, helping that run, and also as friends and family.
Well, Ray, of course, is my first cousin, and he's probably, in a lot of our minds, and probably the best athlete that came through. Ray could play just about anything he wanted, baseball, football, of course, basketball. he was just a gifted athlete. He's one of the fastest guys we had in the county at that time, and he went on to play at University of North Carolina. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. He was the first recruit that Dean Smith signed. Dean became coach when Coach McGuire went to South Carolina, and then he took over the reins at UNC, and Ray was one of the first ones he signed to play for him at UNC. Ray was just an excellent player. He was a good football player. He just could do it all. Alton Hill was a couple of years younger than me. He was had a young fellow about maybe 5'8". When he was like a freshman or sophomore, he sprouted up to about 6'6" or maybe more. And we didn't have many guys like that. Pud was our, and when I was playing our last 2 years, Pud was our big man at 6'2". Alton became our best rebounder as a sophomore, and not just because of his height, but he would go after the ball. And I remember he loved to tell a story that his brothers, who were big fans of the team, would get on him about when he got the ball to shoot it. And he finally turned around, as the story goes, and told him, he said, "That's not my job. My job is to get the ball and get it to the guys that we know are the scorers, so to speak." And I thought that really was a classic line, if you will. It said a lot about our program. Alton, at a very young age, realized what his job was, and all of us were doing our job as coached by Coach McQuaid, and the results speak for themselves. But Alton he knew what he was supposed to do, is get that ball for us, and did a very good job of doing that. And we're going to miss Alton. They're having, those of you in Beaufort on March 9th, they're having a celebration of life for Alton. And I'm sure his family would appreciate anybody that showed up there for that. And
he went on to a great career at Atlantic Christian, right?
Oh, he did. It's sad to say, a lot of people, like in my case, I graduated and went away and hadn't spent much time back in Beaufort and don't really know the life stories of a lot of my teammates. Well, when Alton passed away and I got to see the obituary, I found out that he went on to Barton College and not only played basketball, but was a huge track star. Yeah. And some of his records, some of his times are still records at Barton today. He's in their Hall of Fame. Right. He was just a tremendous athlete and/or student, I understand, at Barton. So it's such a shame that it takes a passing for someone that then you find out the legacy they really left.
Well, Butch, we could talk to you all day long about those Seadogs teams. They've reached such legendary status, but we thank you for the time you've given us today.
Thank you, guys, for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. Obviously, at this age and stage, there aren't a whole lot left in the county that would remember those days, but those that are, I'm sure, they probably heard a few things I did that aren't totally accurate, but that's the best of my memory that I can pull up today. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.